Something that I learned a long time ago was that people care more about the engagement with the facilitator, the presenter, me, or the person I'm presenting with, than
Mhm.
how pretty my slides look. So
Oh,
on anything that Chris Bugaj is doing, you're not going to see something from like Slides Go or like any of those template warehouses that you can get to make your slides look all fancy and pretty. One, they're typically an accessibility issue, and I do a lot with accessibility, right? So
mhm.
a long time ago, I made the decision I am just going to have a simple background of white, just a white background with black text and an image. Or like I'm big into memes or some sort of a bitmoji or something like that of myself. But the whole keep it simple. And one of the reasons that has really boded well for me over the years is that oftentimes when different organizations will hire me to do a presentation, I'll have done this presentation that was 3 hours. Well, they only have 2 hours, so I'm gonna, and they want a slightly different variation. I want this geared towards parents rather than teachers or whatever, right? So I am often stealing slides from previous presentations and sliding them in and out. And if each time I was doing a presentation, I was picking the perfect Slides Go template, there'd always be having to go back and fix the aesthetics of it. But if it's always just the same, keep it simple, white with black text and little modifications here and there, then I can make those adjustments a lot faster and with a lot less frustration. So how does that sit with you, and how does that compare with your experience?
Okay, so a couple different things. First, I think that's very masterful to keep it classic. My logo is actually black and white, so it would make a ton of sense to just slap it on there and keep it pushing. But I have found myself being distracted by all of the frou-frou and the exciting slides. And so that is what I have been doing for the past, I'll say about 2 years since the pandemic. I've been really drawn to the aesthetics. And if you ever spend time on my Instagram, you will know that I'm all into like graphic art and this and that. But I think that this is a surefire way to make sure your point is getting across. I spoke in Toronto once at a accessibility conference, and this was probably one of the first that I had ever did outside of like working in a classroom. And this was like my first like big deal presentation to people who were non-educators. And afterwards, I asked, like, does anybody have feedback? This is a quaint space. I'd love to know what you all think. And they like were going in on me, like, you didn't have this, and you used all of these pictures, and you didn't even describe. We have people here that are blind. And I'm like, whoa, wait, I didn't know.
It only takes once.
So so I will say that you are spot on as it relates to like using memes or GIFs. That could be a miss. That could certainly be a miss when you're using all of the pictures that are lively, because you are excluding those who are unable to see those pictures. And even if you describe it, I still think they'll be missing the mark. So I love what you said there.
Go ahead, May.
What happens with this movement that we had a couple years ago, which is like, a picture says 1,000 words, brings out emotions. I know the one that comes to mind immediately is the iceberg and all the iceberg on the bottom. So you bring that up and you don't even have to say anything. People are looking at it, and then you can go into whatever topic you're saying that supports that. So can we do, and that's the only thing that's on a slide. I've done that too. What are your thoughts on that?
So not to cut you off, Chris, because I feel like you're about to come through with some gems, but I do want to say, in my experience, having had everybody like give me feedback during that presentation I did, they mentioned that it's helpful to go to the picture and then explain in depthly what is happening on that picture. So if you go to the slide and you say, So I want everyone to take a look at this picture here. So what we're seeing is an iceberg. And then that iceberg had, so you're kind of telling the story of that picture, and you're doing it in a way that's really inclusive, because the people who are watching and who can see it, they're able to agree like, okay, it's an iceberg, all right. And then those who are not able to see it, they're able to get a grasp of what they should be seeing. So, Chris.
I was going to say something similar. Let me just add on to that. And that is, especially when you're preparing a course or a presentation and you're putting that image there, one of the accessibility features in any presentation software, or any good one, let me put it that way, knock on wood, like so, Google Slides has it, PowerPoint has it, is the alt text and alt text or alt tag. It's sometimes the terminologies are used synonymously, but the point is that there's a block of where you can put text that describes the image. So if someone was participating, they could, who had a visual impairment, they could hit the play button on their screen reader, and it would, when it gets to that image, it would read the alternative text. And one of the reasons I think that's really important to do when you're putting together a presentation is just what you were saying, Jeannette, is that it helps you think through as a presenter, well, what is the salient point? Like, what am I trying to describe here by putting this image here? So that it's not just floofy stuff that I'm throwing up on the screen that can be distracting, but there's an actual point behind it. And I know what that point is. I know what I'm trying to get at, so that someone with a screen reader could then listen to that back, maybe not even in real time during the presentation, but they'd have that text that they could rely on and that they could use, and that we used it as for the presenter to really solidify what we were trying to say about that image.
And to piggyback again or echo what you're saying, I love how you said that in their own time they can watch it and they'll be able to appreciate it that way. What I used to do very often, and I haven't done that in a while, and I would love to talk through this as well, but I would create a bit.ly link of my slides, and that was my first slide. I would tell people, hey, if you want to use your own device, if you would prefer to use your laptop or your cell phone or whatever you have, this is the link to the slides. You can go through them as I am presenting. So I always thought that that was kind of cool. And it was a quirk of accessibility because it gives them the access to that information and they have it, and it's meeting them where they are. So if they do need to listen to that alt tag and they have their headphones, they can certainly do that.
I'm going to take that one step even further. So I've used bit.ly for years as well. A tripping point that I find some people do, I'll go to a presentation sometimes and I'll see someone use Bitly. And what they might not recognize is that if you created a Bitly account, for free, you can customize an infinite number of URLs. So oftentimes presenters will just use the random numbers or letters, which I find much less accessible because you're constantly having, what is A? C, two,
is that like, a capital C or a lowercase c?
But if it's like Jeannette's awesome presentation, even if it's longer than it would be than the generic, I can type I can type that in much faster. Jeannette's awesome presentation, bit.ly/Jeannette's awesome presentation is so much faster because chances are people coming to your presentation can type,
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of making a link that is connected to the actual presentation and that is potentially even shorter. So instead of even doing Jeannette's presentation, maybe JR Prees, something so that they'll be able to hop in real quick. So I love that idea. So what I wanted to converse about and what I was thinking about is now I'm getting to a place where I feel like sharing presentation could potentially pose a threat to people utilizing that and presenting on it as well. I've gone to some conferences where people were like, well, can you give me your slides? And I've always been the type of person that says, absolutely, like, I want this to help you. But then what happens if someone is taking your presentation and presenting on it? It's like, oh, so what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, before I answer that, let me just throw out one other strategy here for that first slide, and that is, and while we were talking about accessibility, and then I'll answer that and
Okay.
give my two thoughts, my 2 cents on it. So oftentimes, in fact, always, I put a QR code on the front slide as well. So again, that's another accessibility quick shortcut where someone can just hold up their mobile device. It highlights it captures the QR code, and then it brings it to their device. So just in case someone can't type or has trouble typing, it's like, if I can get my phone up there, then it'll scan the QR code, and now I have the slides. So and have you used the QR code? Is that?
I have not. I was going to ask you, what website do you use? Now, I've facilitated for organizations, and they've had the QR code already set up, but for a personal presentation, I've never used that.
So you can Google, over the years, I've used different ones. So you just Google QR code generator. That said, just in the last few months, Google itself, Google Chrome has updated. So I do all of my stuff in Google Slides. And in the URL bar, on the far right of the URL bar, there's a little icon now that looks like a box with an arrow jumping out of it. It's not exactly the share button, but it's kind of close. Like it's sort of similar to the share icon. And if you click on that, one of the options is copy link, send to your devices, and then the third one down is QR code, and it generates a QR code for you. So you can just use the Google one, and it's got this cute little dinosaur in there. So it's kind of fun.
Who doesn't love cute dinosaurs, right?
Now, as far as the problem of someone stealing your slides, so first, I find that's exceptionally rare. Like it can happen. I've talked to other presenters where a good friend of mine once was like, he was walking by the room, was like, oh, or heard the title of a presentation at a conference, and he was like, oh, that's similar to mine. I do stuff on Chrome accessibility. Walked into the presentation, and it was his slides being displayed, right? And so it happens. I just find that it happens very rarely. The second thing that I've always sort of taken the tact that it's that what's the old expression, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, you know what I mean? And chances are the person that's stealing your slide cannot do the show as well as you can. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know your stuff better than they could know it. So it'll always come off like that carbon copy, you know, like, and then if I were to catch somebody doing it, I think my reaction would be, hey, I have a slide very similar. I don't know if you've seen it. Let me show you. And next time I would appreciate attribution, you know, feel free to use my stuff. Just say this is from Chris Bugaj, you know, put my Twitter handle on there or something, asking permission beforehand. And maybe even saying that at the beginning. I have often had slides in many presentations where I'm saying, it's free, all of this stuff, take it, use it, attribution is appreciated. Sort of putting it out under I don't do it as officially as I used to, but used to officially call it Creative Commons licensing and have a slide that this is how, so it's explicit. So no one, because chances are too, people don't know, like they don't know, oh, I didn't know that was like stealing someone's stuff, you know, again, I give people the benefit of the doubt. So being explicit about how I'm licensing my material at the beginning of a slide deck could go a long way to kind of educating the people that are in your presentation that, oh, she doesn't want me stealing this. He doesn't want me to reuse this, or yeah, go ahead and use it and just give me attribution, you know? And I would always side on use my stuff and give me attribution, because that just gets the word out about Chris Bugaj, you know?
Love it. And I think that my question comes really from a scarcity mindset and not an abundant mindset. So I've spoken in countries where they don't necessarily have the resources that I'm presenting on. So I know it would benefit them to present all throughout the country with that information. It always makes me really leery. I went to a conference once where I spoke, and afterwards, a young lady came up to me and she had so many inquiries about dyslexia. And me being the person that I am, I sat down and was like, get the piece of paper out. Let me tell you. So you're going to need this. You're going to need this. And then like a month later, it probably was a little over a month. I'll say 6 weeks later, she was releasing a book called the Dyslexia Bible. And I'm like, well, wait, hold on. Now you just was asking me about it. I didn't know you were that privy to, this particular language-based learning disorder. And I think that is what made me a little more guarded around my intellectual property, like, man. But I love what you said about letting people know, like, hey, it's appreciated. It's getting me out there. So, feel free to utilize it. Just let me, use my info.
Yeah. Well, and Jeannette, I mean, ultimately, like when it's all said and done and we're you and I meet face to face someplace and we're clinking our glasses and it's 75 years old, we're retired from whatever we're doing, there'll probably still be work that needs to be done in the area of dyslexia, right?
Agreed.
So getting the word out is probably even more important, so someone stole some stuff. This is, again, my interpretation. I don't put this on anybody. Someone stole my stuff and presented it. Okay. What did it cost me? A couple $100, maybe even a couple $1,000, but the word is getting out, which is the grander mission we have in our life. You know what I mean? So I try and keep that perspective that the grander mission is about helping the kids and helping families, and that work will never not be needed,
Okay. And it will never not be done either. So, hey,
right?
Let's keep it going. Love it. Perspective is everything.
For sure. So what else? What other thoughts? So I'm going to guess you said with like your Instagram and stuff, you already know about Canva. You probably already upload and have your brand. Oh, where'd she go?
She had enough of you.
Didn't like that last piece of advice.
She's coming back. I love the new ready-made QR code on Chrome. I updated and now I have it.
You have it, right?
Yeah, that's great. I usually go to QR.
All right. I'm back. Apologies. Now, if you don't mind rephrasing the question for me.
Yeah. So I was asking about, it sounded when you were talking about Instagram and you were talking about how you were sort of into graphic design and making your stuff look a certain way. You feel like you have a brand and and are you familiar with that feature in Canva where you can upload an image? Like right now we're recording on Zoom and I have this background image, right? I can upload this image into Canva and it'll pull the colors out. So then whenever I make a bookmark or a social media post, it'll have that color scheme. Are you familiar with that?
So I think you're referring to like removing the background. Is that it?
No, not necessarily. So are you familiar with Canva? Are you making your stuff?
Yes, I use that exclusively.
Yeah.
I love Canva.
Canva has a feature, and I don't know if it's the premium feature or if it's a free feature, but it has a feature where you can take an image that you've already created, you can upload it into Canva, and it will pull out all of those colors and make a palette of colors for you so that when you decide to make other stuff like a YouTube banner heading, or header, or like I said, a bookmark, or I don't know, whatever, how Canva has all those different templates that, you don't have to keep searching. Well, what color was it? What number was it? It has that palette for you. So you can always just draw upon that palette to make your next thing.
Yes, so I'm definitely familiar with that. And that is considered the branding, like the colors, and even with the fonts too, because I've been able to pull out my font that I traditionally use, and now it's saved in the Canva. So shout out to Canva, because I think it has definitely leveled the playing field for a lot of us who have been like creative, but not really formally trained. So now we can do all of these amazing things. So there you go.
Well, Jeannette, I got to ask, if you know off the top of your head, especially being someone who works in dyslexia, what font do you choose? Because I find that's an issue. A lot of times the fonts being chosen are not the most accessible fonts. You know what I mean?
Yes. So with dyslexic learners, a lot of times they will find that the letters not only are they mirroring themselves, but just looking at like the D and the B, it could be quite confusing. Now, this is just one of the many different characteristics, but I found that if you use font that is extremely distinct and unique with every single letter, then that is really helpful. And that's going to be Comic Sans. There is a font that is called Dyslexia. That's really helpful. And it's a lot of them. I'll say it's about 6 that I've found to be really, really helpful for those who have issues with being able to distinguish between the different letters. So if someone is interested, I would say start with Dyslexia because it's free, and then Comic Sans because it usually is already on your computer. So
love it. Cool. All right. What other kind of questions?
Let me think now. You know, this method and where we're just kind of like bouncing ideas. I'm like, man, let me think of some more ideas because this is really helpful.
Well, I've got a question for you, Jeannette. If you're talking about like making like an asynchronous course, what are you using to record your video? And you have the slides up behind you, and it's mini Jeannette in the corner. How are you doing that?
So honestly, I've been using Zoom quite a bit. I find that is really accessible. It's super easy, no guesswork. Just hop on and start recording, have your slides already shared to your screen and go from there. During the editing process, you can do some other things. I did see the other day, I purchased a course from a classroom teacher, and this course was all about looking at different ways you can monetize your experience in the classroom. It's a great class, great product that I bought, and it's by Miss, let me see, I think it's Miss Caldwell's classroom or somebody's classroom is the name of the person. But anyways, so what I noticed about her particular courses is that her face was circular and it wasn't that traditional square Zoom. And I was like, I didn't ask her, but I'm intrigued to see whether if there are some other products that could be helpful to keep you on the screen, but to maybe you're a circle now and not that square where you're cutting off stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I don't know what specifically that could have been. It could have been a mask that is placed over the video. So like I would know how to do that. The way I do it is record with Zoom, and then I take that video file and I'll put it in WeVideo. Again, because I have access to WeVideo. WeVideo is an online video editing tool. And then what you have is you have your different tracks, right? So you have your audio track, you have your video track with the slides behind you. And then there's the presenter, right? And I could see how you could put a mask over that in the same way you overlay text or something like that. When I say put a mask, I don't mean like on my face. I mean like a circle
that's so prevalent now.
But a circle that sort of it changes that it's not a square down there. And I've also seen, although I haven't played with it, like a green screen behind, so it actually eliminates like the square or the circle, and it's just the cutout of the person. I've seen people do that. I haven't done that.
Wow. Okay. That's nice. And it's wonderful to see all of these options that are now available to us. And it's unfortunate that a pandemic had to bring all of these different ways for us to connect. I feel like online courses were somewhat relevant, and then the pandemic happened and it was like, OMG. So now everything is online course accessible. So I'm loving that WeVideo tip or trick. So I'm going to have to check that out and look at ways in which I can mask. And it's not really a big deal. I think it's more of an aesthetics thing. So
for sure. May, I know you work with a lot of asynchronous online courses, different people that are putting stuff together. Have you seen cool tricks this way?
Yeah, I wanted to share Timothy Kretschmann. He came to us, he does at Commobles, and he is a former director of special education who now focuses on trying to bridge the gap between us creating all of these great accommodations and teachers actually using them. And so he did a presentation for us, and he had his slides behind him virtually, used the green screen, and he wanted to be walking, talking, and moving. And we got a lot of criticism back during it and afterwards, just saying that it was difficult because he was sometimes standing in front of the words. distracting. I don't you know, I was really surprised because I was like, that is so cool because you can see his whole body, you know, and he was moving and shaking. And he said, you know, I wanted this to feel like an in-service where we're all together rather than just half of me floating up in the top right corner. So I was surprised at that. So I just wanted to give that back to you guys. So what he said is maybe then next time he would design the slides so that the words are here. And he has you know, another camera. And so he had the camera looking at him, also making sure that he's looking at the right camera all the time. And so he's, you know, speaking to the audience. So these are just a couple of things that kind of move us into more like directing and acting almost, right? You know, just making sure that the set and everything looks the way that you want it to look.
Oh, May. So I've had that exact same experience where I've recorded everything, then I'm putting the video together, and I've had to move the box around because wherever the box was might be covering an important piece of the slide. And as I was doing it, I was thinking, okay, this is probably a good thing because it probably shifts people at, oh, Chris is up here now. Oh, Chris is down here now. You know what I mean? Where it's, you're not just like, you can imagine 2 hours, someone down in the bottom right-hand corner and you're going through slides or whatever however long it was, can start to get a little bit like, you know, so that's another, I think, piece of advice there is keeping whatever you're doing short and bringing up, keeping it well paced. You know, I think TLDR is a real thing. Too long, didn't read. And same thing when first thing someone sends you a YouTube video, the first thing anyone does is look at how long it is. You know, if it's over 7 minutes, you're not watching it. You know what I mean? Or you might, if the person, you might turn on like, hey, can I change the speed and put it up to like 1.5? Because I don't have time to watch a 7-minute video, you know?
No.
So your course, breaking it down into small chunks where it's small, like what point am I making? Then, and it also, I think, gives people a place where they can then jump off, pause, and come back to it.
Now, I think with YouTube, the company in itself benefits from longer videos because they can put more ads in there in that way. But I'd have to agree with you. This is an age where we are all trying to really understand how we work because we've been thrusted in working from home so frequently. So our attention spans have been impacted severely. I certainly cannot watch a video longer than, I'll give you 10 minutes and that's it. That's all I can commit to. And I have to move on to something else. I do think that there is brilliance in the way that we are presenting and how you can have the different bullet points very succinct and then your face or your body formatted to where they can still see those bullet points. Now, I've worked with a company before where I was facilitating for them, and their thing was that, you know, the bullet points are just really just to jog your thought process, but you're not supposed to be reading directly off of them. So that brings up another controversial, you know, thought in the way we're presenting. Like, should you be reading verbatim or should you just bam, bam, and then go to the next slide, you know?
Well, okay. So it's so funny you say that because I was thinking of bringing up this point back when we were talking about the accessibility of images. It's sort of the same thing when it comes to text is that, and I think the answer is still the same, is that you've always heard, right? Everyone here is don't read the text off of slides. Well, I feel like that is an accessibility issue where I've learned actually you do read the text off the slides, but it doesn't have to be in a Ferris Bueller sort of way. Like, let me let's talk about here's the point, the bullet point, and now let's talk about it for a second. Here's the bullet point. Now let's talk about it for a second. And you can move through it in that way that you're meeting the accessibility needs, but you're also getting it's not droning on. May?
So I'm a control freak. And what? Are you guys saying no, you're not?
Oh, we cut out there, May, by accident. Cut out, I think.
The latency, that's what it was. And when I have, like, I know you're not supposed to have more than like 4 or 5 bullets. I mean, that's like the rule, right? You just can't have all this text. But I like to come to a new slide, have the title, and then start with a bullet. And I still like animation because I'm controlling it. But I want to ask you guys about that. So they have the handouts, they can see it all, but we're just talking about that first bullet. Because if you open it up and there's all 5, you can't read and listen at the same time. And I know I do it too. I'm visually scanning all 5 of them. and the person is already deep into, discussing bullet number 1. So what do you guys think about animation? Because I think there's been back and forth about don't have anything sliding in and fading in and out,
I think that it can be overdone. Moderation is key, as we learned earlier with Chris saying that he likes to keep it black and white. So I think that animation certainly brings that engaging layer to the presentation, but let's not overdo it. I think sometimes we can make it more chaotic than it needs to be. I do like the idea of having one bullet available to read at a time, and then another one will fade in, and then another one. But I also like the idea of setting the expectation as you're presenting and saying, hey, we're going to go over all 5 of these steps. So we're going to start with the first one, so people understand that, hey, I'm going to be reading along with you and helping you figure out each of these points that I have posted or listed here. Chris, what are your thoughts?
So for me, it's extremely rare that I'm going to have bullet points on a slide in general. If I have 1 or 2 of those in a slide deck, that's a lot, right, for me. Because what I've learned over the years is instead of putting bullet points on a slide, I will take each point and put it on its own slide. Less text. Why stick on one slide and hit animation? It's harder to swap in and out later on. If I'm changing to a different presentation for a different organization, it's more stuff I have to manage. But having that individual slide, here's the one piece of text you need. And then again, I like to try and make it fun. So I will have some sort of meme or image that goes along with it, unless it's like, this is the point. And it's just the text, to try and not dilute it. So it depends on what the point is. And if I can think of a fun way to present it, sometimes it's just such a super powerful point I'm trying to make. It's just the text. So it's rare that I'd use animation. It's more frequent. I would break those bullet points out and put them in separate slides.
I have 2 questions that have just come to mind. So one question is, what do you do to hook your audience immediately? What's that one thing that you got to do to get people invested in what you're talking about as you are standing up and you're looking weird and you're saying, hey, everybody? What's the one thing?
Well, okay. So that again is so variable based on, is it in person or is it not? Is it asynchronous? Is it not? Is it synchronous with Zoom? And then people are floating into the room and you got the chat going, So I don't know that there's like one strategy that I use to necessarily hook people. That said, I think of most presentations as a 3-act play, So I am, the participants are the characters. And the first act is a problem that we're trying to all work together to solve. The plot in the middle, the second act is, okay, what are some strategies we can put together? What are some ideas participants can put together to solve this problem? And then the third act is, okay, what's our actions plan? What are we going to do about it? What's our resolution here at the end? What are some of our takeaways? What are you going to do? And thinking about any presentation, no matter how long it is, in that sort of 3-act formula has really served me well. May?
Again, just speaking from my experience in your presentations, is I love the hands-on activities that you always put in there. Even if it's, you never used a QR code, let's do it now. You might have 2 people in the audience who have never done it, and Chris, by the end, has them QRing every QR code up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that. Okay. Love that.
That is part of the formula too, and I feel it in myself. If if I've talked for 10 minutes without posing some sort of question or some sort of participant engagement, if they're not actively here solving something, I can start to feel it in myself. I get a little like angsty, the butterflies start to shake. Like we had the point of doing this sort of professional learning is like people can listen to podcasts, they can go to YouTube, they can, if they don't want to just consume and listen to somebody, they can do that. It's the point of being in a professional learning experience like the ones we're discussing is having that engagement and that interactivity.
Love it. Love it. So I'm going to be doing an in-person talk next month in New Orleans, Louisiana, one of my favorite cities. And I guess for me, I'm feeling a little anxious because I normally present at tech workshops and for tech companies. This will be something, it won't be new, but every time I present with educators who are in the classroom, they're doing the work, it always gives me a little pause because I'm like, I'm standing on this ivory tower telling you all what you need to be doing, and I'm not in that classroom, I'm not in that therapy room. So I'm really, when I posed that particular question, I was thinking about what it'll be like. I don't know why. I think that is maybe some trauma I have about presenting to educators, because I always remember, when I was getting professional learning or professional development, and these people were talking over my head, and it was like a sit and get, like, you're not in my shoes, you don't know what's going on. So I think that was helpful, though, to think about this 3-act play, and to understand that this is a problem we're all solving. First, you have to pose that problem. Then you have to maybe pose some variety of ways that the problem can be solved. And then the resolution itself is exposed at the end. So,
yeah, well, for sure. And when we're asking people to solve that problem, I find letting them solve it and then guiding them to things they hadn't thought of before, and that can happen through reflective questions like, all right, I see the strategy you're putting here. Have you thought about what technology are you using? Okay, what technology can help us? Have you thought about having text read out loud? What do you think would happen if we had text read out loud? What would your students do? Like posing questions to them, but I think really authentically letting them answer questions has really, again, served me well, because it gets them, again, engaged. And I don't have to be that sage on the stage answering it all and knowing it all. It's more about them, and then filling in my expertise here and there. Okay, here's some gaps I think maybe we missed,
I like the phrase sage on the stage. That's funny.
You want to be the guide on the side, right?
Even
All right,
better.
before we go, I wanted to see if Jeannette, you can share a little bit about this really creative area that you've gone into, which she just touched on, Chris, is that she's been out presenting to the tech community. And I don't know if this is anything that you would be interested in, but I definitely think of you as somebody who could, if you haven't already, because I don't know what you do outside of our community, looked into using your expertise and moving it into other professions. And so I've learned so much from her. I'm really excited. I'm going to start doing that myself. And I know you have so much value. So just listening to her, who knows what might resonate with you.
Well, Jeannette, let me ask you there are you going to organizations like, let's say, a company, and they're like, how do we make things more accessible? Because we recognize that we might have people, we might have a dyslexic community in our employee population. How do we support them better? Or how do we make our products more accessible to everybody, so that people who are living with dyslexia can access our products better? Is like that's sort of the avenue that you're taking?
Wait to hear she's blowing it away. I'm so proud of her.
So I will say that it is a little bit of both of those people in the room. Usually there are companies that contract me to come out and provide a pathway towards retaining, recruiting dyslexic and other language-based learning disorder employees, because now the world is starting to see how valuable it is that we are bringing people that don't necessarily think like us or look like us to the table, so that we can create innovation and we can have these efficient processes and streamlines in place. So a lot of companies are coming to me and they're saying, hey, we want to get more people who are differently abled on our team, or we have some people who are differently abled and we don't know what we're doing to facilitate their stay. And we just need a little more assistance. We need knowledge around that. And so one of the things that I've talked about is creating those employee resource groups where people have those like-minded individuals that they can connect with. And just creating a safe space where people can authentically show up. Because what we'll see is a lot of individuals who have disabilities, they do not disclose that to their employer. I believe from the statistics I read, is about 70% of people who have ADHD or dyslexia or any other language-based learning disability or disorder, they're not telling their employer because they're probably scared to get shunned and pointed out and say, hey, this person is different. Look this way at this person. Or B, they don't want to get less work or to be treated in a manner in which at work where they're like, oh, you're not capable of doing this, so we're going to have you do this. So that's just some of what I've seen, and that's like that precipice of the iceberg. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, well, that's exciting to hear that you're having companies reach out to you and understanding that diversity in every form of that word helps, and they're looking for and makes better products and makes a better working environment and leads to innovation. And so taking active steps to actually hire people and bring them in and say, okay, we recognize this is a weak spot for us. How do we change? That's exciting to hear. And yes, May, I'd love to do more of that.
And yeah, I'm thinking about like just the dialogue we've had about creating presentations that are accessible. Just looking at that interviewing process. How are companies making their interviewing process more accessible to, let's say, someone that's on the autism spectrum? Like, what are you doing so that that person feels safe in that interview and they don't get anxiety and overwhelmed? You know,
here's the thing, Jeannette, right? Oh my gosh. And whatever they put in place to help somebody, well, how can we make it more accommodating for people for an autistic or for people with autism is going to work for everybody else too. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Are your current strategies really getting you to get the great employees that you really wanted in the first place? What if we just change that up?
Yeah. I think about even in the classroom as we're implementing the Orton-Gillingham and the balanced or structured literacy and the multisensory approaches so that we can cater to dyslexic learners. We're also helping create pathways for all other learners. Who doesn't love tactile learning and, you know, kinesthetic? So you're playing with some clay so you can learn the letter sounds. Like, I would have adored that. I had those big phonics books that we had to go and do every
Why is that specialized instruction? Why isn't it just instruction for everybody? Thanks.
So Chris, this is where I want you to be is we did a presentation, a different presenter did it with SED talking about 504s for professionals. And that is making me think of, you know, again, going to this circuit, going to the tech world and saying, you need to know this is available to you and advocate for yourself, in addition to having the HR people in the room. So there's so many people didn't even know, especially now, because so many people are coming forward with lifelong mental health issues that they've been dealing with. We need people like you two out there. Look, I'm getting so excited. We need the people like you out there educating for our adults. You know, we've been so mired in the school systems, right? And we always think a child with autism is in, you know, 4th grade, right? Or a 4-year-old even, like, you know, they're just so cute and we just have to work with them now. But what's happening is all those kids have grown up and they're out there working and they're trying to deal with life with people who don't get it. You know, they don't understand the spectrum. They don't understand ADD or ADHD, like all of these things. And when I've been hearing about Jeanette's work is I feel like people like yourself, Chris, you've got to get out of our fishbowl, you know, and I'm not saying that negative. I'm saying we need you to go out and educate all of the people that are out there in the working space and help starting to change the culture and the path for all of these kids that are still coming up, you know, and having to get out there. That's where I was like, these two guys, you guys have got to meet. I'm trying to push Jeannette to do a course that is very specific to this, which would be, how do you get out of our professional network to share, you know, especially the different platforms that we have. We have so many great leaders in different areas. And so, you know, you guys connecting is great, but I really think that Jeannette doing a course that is not saying exactly how to do it, but like even what you did with me opened my mind, you know, to, wow, like you're so right. We need to start educating the real world. You know, and educating adults. I feel strongly about adults because they don't realize that it's not enough just to put on Facebook, you know what, I finally admit that I have ADHD. You know, there's so much more that goes into that, you know, a life of always feeling that you can't get your stuff done, that you can get strategies now at work. You can, all of these things. Like, I think everyone is so much more, they're open and ready now.
Something that resonates with me is the fact that dyslexia is hereditary and it runs in the family. Do you know how many parents who have come out and said, I hated school, but I didn't know what to do? I mean, or someone who said, I dropped out of high school because it was just so difficult for me. And now my child is struggling with reading, and we see it now. We see the correlation. And I'm like, man, because 20, 30, 40 years ago, people weren't really talking about dyslexia. You may have heard it, but it was like, oh, dyslexia, I don't know, so yeah.
Jeannette, let me ask you.
Think there. Mm-hmm.
Jeannette, did you, to what May was asking about there was about like marketing yourself to companies. Is that how you have sort of marketed yourself? Is sort of like, I'll do schools, but I do companies too. Like, have you made any specific steps to actually target industry?
Yeah, so that's what I generally do is I target industry professionals, but I have a very steep influence in education. So tons of educators are connected with me. I'm connected with them. My community is pretty vast, but what I do, like for instance, with my social media, I like to put out information for teachers and SLPs that are in my community, but outside of just posting about reading and language and literacy, on the back end, I'm pursuing tech organizations and companies and saying, hey, this is what I do. So it's an interesting dichotomy because I've built a following based on my love of reading and my love for the work that I've done as a speech pathologist and also in the education space. Because I worked as an educator for like 3 or 4 years, but a lot of the paid work that I'm doing is definitely outside of that scope. It's more with technology.
She's a coder.
Yeah.
Come on.
So I did learn how to code.
Code herself, Chris. Oh, there's so much. She's so humble. So the other thing is she can't give it all away because she's creating a course. You're going to have to take her course, Chris.
Right.
I'm her agent.
But Chris and I we might do our own course too, yes. Though. So, hey.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, this has been exciting. Yeah. And I think you're right on. There's the world's cannot change fast enough, right? And so targeting not just one population, but all of them makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so I think that was it. So I guess for the last question, what would you say to someone who had a couple different course ideas in their mind? And to answer your question, these course ideas would be to be virtual courses that were asynchronous. And they were feeling very unmotivated. And they just were like, I don't know. What would you say to that person?
Okay, I'll give you two things. One is I know a handful of people who have created online courses, and it has been very lucrative. That sort of people will say passive income. I don't think it's passive income at all because it takes a lot of work to get it up and running and then to maintain it and then to market it, right? It's still you're active, but the content itself, once it's created, has been created. So if you're at all motivated by money, then I think the course itself could be that could be a motivator. But the second thing that I would say is to just do it. It's like any other work, it won't be perfect. I think that's probably a big roadblock for a lot of people is like, oh man, I want to try and get that circle around my head in the bottom right-hand corner. And I'm not sure how to do that. And that seems like cumbersome, but I know how to do this other stuff. So I don't really want to do that. You don't need to circle around your head. You don't need all the floof. Just get it done, get it out there. You'll find your audience, and then you can always learn from there. You can always make it better. What's the old expression? Don't let the enemy of good. You've heard of it? What is the
enemy of progress or something about an enemy of progress, right?
Something like that. Don't let perfect be the enemy of done. Something like that.
I'll take that.
Just get it done, I think, is the and if someone, you could tell already that you are someone who has established themselves as a as a leader in the field who works hard, right? So this is just one more thing you got to work through, you know?
Now, listen, I didn't
analysis
even say it was
paralysis.
about me, Chris. I didn't even say it was about me.
Yeah. Your friend who we're talking about.
Deeper friend. I was thinking analysis paralysis. Is
Yes.
that another one?
Yes, that's a great experience.
Paralysis. That is a great one.
Yeah. But I think you can also have a large reach if you're motivated by helping people. It's so much harder to do synchronous, right? It's so much harder to be like, especially families who have kids and I mean both their industry and educators. So finding time to do something, I have to be online at Thursday at 4 p.m. It's not going to happen. Even if my best intentions, the numbers are going to be lower. Where async, you know what? It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and for whatever reason, I can't get to sleep. Ah, man, that Jeannette course. Let me just do that. It's been, people can do it when they can do it. That async piece, I just think it was coming before the pandemic. And when you said, Jeannette, like the pandemic just helps accelerate how fast people are moving to that. There was already successful companies,
I agree.